Please welcome to the stage now, Tija Mittal.
My boyfriend Andrew and I woke up on a really beautiful Saturday morning in the boring suburbs of Maryland. And as we woke up, we were deciding between watching South Park or watching Fixer Upper, knowing that if we did watch Fixer Upper, we were gonna spend the next 3 hours at Home Depot. And I was looking forward to Andrew making pancakes and biscuits and eggs while I kept reminding him, you do this because I can't cook. I can cook. But instead, we decided it's about 10 a.m., we've got the whole day ahead of us, let's just snuggle for a bit. Unfortunately, as we were snuggling, we were listening to his upstairs neighbors who were teenagers, and I think we've decided as an audience that we don't like teenagers. I used to be a camp counselor, and it was at a gifted and talented camp for math students, where we had to remind them not to try to climb lampposts and not to swing their keys because they could knock each other's eyes out, which is a thing you only realize when someone has knocked someone else's eye out. And these were the gifted kids, which tells you that even the smartest teenagers can't be trusted. And these were not those kids. And they were jumping up and down, and Andrew and I were just looking at each other like, these damn kids. And as we were kind of snuggling and looking at each other, all of a sudden, Andrew's gaze got very intense, and he said, I think I hear someone yelling for help. I jumped out of bed in my pajamas, grabbed my glasses and my phone, and I ran to the door. Andrew had to stay behind to put some clothes on, and I swung the door open and just saw blood everywhere in front of his landing. Blood drops the size of fists, and I couldn't hear anything. I think my body just kind of wouldn't take in sound, and I saw this boy coming down the stairs. He's a black teenager with these big brown eyes that looked so sad and so scared. And he started walking towards me, and I realized that his jaw was hanging open and that there were teeth in his jaw, but they weren't in the right order. They were scrambled, and there was blood pooling and oozing. He couldn't talk, and as he started walking towards me, I was stuck, and I realized that I couldn't move. But I stepped out just from sheer, just my muscles just decided to make me walk out of the door with my phone in my hands. And I walked to him and I said, what happened? And he tried to move his jaw and it wasn't happening. And I yelled back at Andrew, you need to grab a towel right now. In my normal life, I'm a strategy consultant. And I always have these checklists going on in my head so that I can manage whatever's going on. So I had the checklist, get a towel, make sure this guy is still standing. Maybe I should call 911. I called 911. 911, what's your emergency? There's a young man. He is standing in front of me. He's very injured from his mouth. He is bleeding profusely onto the ground. Can you please send help right away? And I don't know what his name is. I don't know anything else, but you need to send an ambulance right now. As I hung up the phone, I looked at this boy thinking, what happened to you? How did this, there was so much blood that it clearly had seeped through the landing upstairs. And in my head, I'm a child of the 80s, so I kept thinking, all right, I'm guessing a 4-poster bed was probably involved. Like, they're probably jumping around on the bed, and like one of those things probably just got him in the jaw, right? And it was just bad news. Andrew came out, and he was comforting me. He gave the boy a towel. I saw this other boy coming from the stairs, the same stairs, but he was frantic. And suddenly I could hear again. I could hear someone else, and I could hear he was the one yelling for help. And he was so frantic, his hands were going to his temples, he was crying and sobbing. And I said, who are you? What is going on? Who is this kid? And he said, that's my cousin Doo-Doo. And I said, well, what happened? And he said, he shot himself. And it was like the aftermath when a bomb goes off and everything starts ringing in your ears, and it's like a flash of bright light in your eyes. And it took a second for me to process. I'm from a very stereotypically nerdy Indian family, and we don't do things with guns, we don't look at guns, we don't go hunting. Like, the only weapon of choice in our household is like a shoe thrown across the room to get your attention. And it was just too much for me to understand. I remember a couple years ago, my mom and I went to Gettysburg. And, they have this old-timey photo booth where you can dress up like an idiot or a cowboy or whatever. And, this one photographer was really into this particular type of pose where, you and the other person are pointing guns at each other. And I thought that was stupid. I was like, I don't think that's funny. I don't like this. So I decided to do that, duck hunting, rabbit hunting season or rabbit season thing where I was looking down the barrel of a gun like an idiot. And my mom had, brought that up pretty recently, saying, you're such a nonviolent person that you couldn't even hold a gun to your mom as a joke. And now here's this teenage boy, shorter than me, muscular but smaller than me, who's bleeding from his face because he shot himself. And I didn't even know what that meant. What did it mean that he shot himself? Was he trying to kill himself? What was going on? It didn't look like he was afraid of his cousin. He was just kind of standing there in shock. So I just couldn't understand. I didn't know what was going on at all. And the cousin didn't stick around to tell us because he just ran off. I just stood there waiting for the ambulance with Andrew and this kid and this bloody child. And I suddenly started realizing that he wasn't just in shock, but he was terrified. He put his arm around my waist, and I froze for a second because I feel terrible saying this, but I was afraid of getting blood on me, and I didn't want to hold him close. I don't know that I wanted to be emotionally close to him either, but I pulled him close anyway, and I kind of touched the back of his head and patted him and tried to make some soothing sounds, because that's part of the checklist too, is tell this kid that he's gonna be okay even if you don't know. And I started feeling a little more connected and a little more close than probably I wanted to. And I had to ask myself, why are you and Andrew the only people out here? Why did you go outside? A couple seconds later, I hear someone pulling up and someone coming out of a car and just yelling. And I realize it's the police. I don't know why the police are there before the ambulance is there. And I also, as an Indian woman, I'm not really sure where I stand on the racial matrix when it comes to dealing with the police, but I decided it's probably better me than maybe this kid. So I went with my hands up, because again, I wanted to just kind of felt like that was smart, and went to confront this police officer who rolled out of the car like fucking Wesley Snipes in Blade with the New Order soundtrack behind him. This guy had clearly, he was dying to pull his gun on somebody. And so now I'm actually looking at a gun. Now there's an actual gun, not pointed at me, but it's there. It's in the equation now. And I'm just, hey, we don't need a gun right now. There's a really injured boy. Can you put the gun down? We really need an ambulance. And the guy yells back, who are you? I said, I'm just a neighbor lady. We're fine. There's nothing going on. But this kid really, really needs some help. Can you please get an ambulance? I don't think it's helpful to escalate. Can you please put down your gun? And the guy yells back, you don't tell me to put my gun down. So I just backed away and walked back over to the landing. And Andrew goes, I think maybe I need to talk to the cops. And he was right. So I went back to the kid, and I just tried to kind of talk and comfort him as much as I could. A couple moments later, the EMTs came, thank God, and started talking to and attending to the boy, who, again, he couldn't speak. But what I realized is that as the EMTs were bandaging him up and debating what to do with him and ultimately deciding to take him to shock trauma, that the boy was now sitting, and he was trying to say something. And what I realized that he was saying was, tell my mom I love her. Someone told me and Andrew, you guys need to take a shower. You are covered in blood. We had been standing in a pool of the boy's blood for minutes. As I went and I took a shower, I took a second to think about my checklists and everything that we had just endured over the last couple of minutes. And I remembered that in college, I hadn't wanted to be a doctor because I thought I was gonna freak out at the sight of blood. I wasn't sure that I could handle an emergency. I decided I didn't even want to be a psychologist because I wasn't sure if I could handle the burden of people's problems and issues. And I hadn't taken into account that in a situation like this, someone's humanity might just come to the forefront and guide them through the situation. when I got out of the shower and started talking to Andrew, we just spent the rest of the day in the apartment building that was cordoned off with yellow tape, and we did end up watching Fixer Upper, but couldn't go anywhere. A couple weeks later, I found out that the reason that the boy had shot himself was that they'd found a gun, and they were playing with the gun for Instagram photos, and the gun had gone off and shot the boy in the face, and it actually lodged in his shoulder. But there was so much blood on this child's body, this teenager's body, you couldn't even tell that there were two wounds. And I couldn't understand, like even just for a photo for my mom and I in Gettysburg, like I couldn't even joke with a gun. And now these kids were like playing with this gun, and it had gone off. And the reality behind the picture was that they were both sobbing, and one of them went to shock trauma. I couldn't understand. And as the situation resolved itself, Andrew ran into the neighbors, and we found out that Dudu was going to be okay. I mean, technically okay. I realized after they moved out I was probably never going to see them again, and that was probably for the best. But I thought about what I'd love to say to them, these teenagers, if I did ever see them again. I would tell them how angry I was at them for endangering themselves, for endangering us. Andrew and I hadn't even heard a gunshot. We had no idea what was going on. Those walls and those floors are not that thick. I'm angry at you guys for possibly ruining your future, possibly ruining my future. And I can't believe how stupid you are. And what I would say to Dudu is, I am so glad you get to tell your mom that you love her. Thank you.
Take a risk. Take a risk.